The vessel Ardent Path emerged from the void between stars like a blade cutting through fabric that had never been meant to tear. For 5 generations, its people had lived and died in its steel corridors, chasing a promise older than any living soul aboard. No one remembered the blue cradle where humankind had begun. They only remembered the stories told around low light and recycled air, stories of a world with skies instead of ceilings, oceans instead of coolant reservoirs, and gravity that came from the pull of a planet rather than the rotation of machinery. At the heart of the Ardent Path walked a man named Oren Vale. His boots struck the floor with the steadiness of ritual. He was a maintainer of the outer spine, a network of conduits that wrapped around the ship's core like veins around a heart. His suit bore the marks of heat exposure and decades of patchwork. In his gloved hands, he carried an emitter wand, a long rod of graphite and filament used to read the pulse of the ship's living circuits. The hum of the generators reverberated through the deck plating. The air tasted faintly of copper and old ozone. It had been that way since the day the ship's central sun core began to weaken. Every system was compensating, redirecting power, conserving warmth. The Ardent Path was sick, and Oren felt it the way a man feels the slow faltering of his own pulse. He reached a junction where the conduits met in a web of transparent tubing, each pulsing with blue light. Beyond the tubes, behind a shield of polyglass, stretched the curve of the ship's hull, and beyond that, empty infinity. Oren touched the emitter to one of the glowing conduits. It flickered weakly, its pulse lagging. "Flow disruption," he muttered to himself. The words echoed. He was alone in the spine, but solitude was familiar. The hum of the ship was company enough. A voice came through the communicator bead embedded at his collar. "Oren, your sector's readings are dropping again. You might want to double-check the intake valves before rerouting power." It was Isha Lorne, the overseer of engineering. Her tone carried the firmness of someone accustomed to taking responsibility for a ship too vast for any single mind to comprehend. "Already on it," Oren replied, straightening. "Section 12 has been showing irregular frequencies. Might be a heat bleed through the shielded ducts. Those ducts are rated for another 50 cycles." "They were," Oren said, "before we started feeding the solar collectors at half efficiency." A pause, then Isha said quietly, "Understood. Just keep the spine breathing, Oren. Without it, we all stop." The line clicked off. He sighed and pressed his hand to the nearest conduit. The vibration beneath his palm was faint but steady. The Ardent Path was alive, even if it struggled. It had carried their ancestors through uncharted darkness, past dead suns and frozen debris fields. It was more than a vessel. It was the last ember of humanity's defiance. And lately, Oren had begun to wonder if that ember was flickering out. He moved deeper into the network until he reached a hatch that opened into the coolant reservoir. The door hissed as it parted. Beyond it was a chamber of glittering frost and whispering vapor. The coolant shimmered in vertical columns, cycling through transparent pipes like veins filled with liquid starlight. Oren crouched beside a control manifold. The indicator lights were dimmer than he liked. He ran diagnostics manually, reading the fluctuations from an old analog reader, a relic from the early days of the ship. Its needle trembled at the edge of the safe zone. "Not dead yet," he murmured. Something moved behind him. He froze. The coolant chamber was supposed to be sealed. He turned slowly. A figure stood in the haze, tall, slim, wearing a technician's suit with no insignia. The faceplate was reflective, hiding the wearer's features. Oren straightened. "This section's restricted. Identify yourself." The figure tilted its head, saying nothing. Then it stepped closer. The air temperature dropped further. The frost spread along the floor. "Stop right there," Oren ordered. He reached for the emitter wand, switching it to active mode. A thin blue filament extended from its tip, humming faintly. "Say something." The figure lifted one gloved hand and placed it against a coolant column. The light within the tube flared, then dimmed, as if drained. Oren felt the hair rise on his arms. "Back away from that," he shouted, but the figure turned its face toward him. For an instant, through the reflection of its visor, he saw not his own image, but a starfield, an impossible spread of distant suns spinning in miniature, forming constellations that twisted and rearranged themselves faster than thought. Then the figure was gone, vanished into the haze, leaving only the whisper of evaporating coolant. Oren stood there for a long moment, heart pounding. He scanned the chamber. No one, no trace, only frost. He tapped his communicator. "Isha, there's been," he stopped. Static hissed in response. The signal was gone. He turned back to the manifold and the diagnostics panel flickered violently. The readings were now off the scale. The coolant temperature was plummeting. Cursing, he slammed his palm on the emergency override. The circuits stabilized, but barely. Whatever had just happened, it had touched the system's heart. When Oren returned to the main corridors, the lights above were dimmer than before. Crew members moved in weary silence, their faces pale under the ship's amber glow. They were used to malfunctions, but not this kind. Not system-wide drops. Not the strange cold creeping through the decks. He made his way to the command ring, where the walls were lined with screens showing real-time readouts of the ship's vital systems. Isha Lorne stood before the largest display, arms crossed, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion in her stance. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said as he entered. "Maybe I did." Oren handed her his reader. Coolant levels dropped to freezing in seconds. Then someone tampered with the flow. Isha frowned as she examined the data. "There's no record of anyone entering that chamber besides you. I saw them, a figure in a suit, no insignia, didn't speak, could be projection interference. The core's power dips have been causing sensor echoes." "Echoes don't drain energy from live circuits," Oren said flatly. Isha looked up at him. Her eyes, the color of burnished steel, narrowed. "You think someone's sabotaging the ship? I think something's here that shouldn't be." She hesitated, then gestured toward the largest viewport. Through it, the stars glimmered like dust scattered on endless glass. "Do you know what's out there, Oren?" He shook his head. "Neither do I," she said, "but our ancestors built this ship to find out." "Maybe what you saw was part of that." Oren thought of the visor reflecting impossible constellations. He didn't want to believe it, but the memory clung to him like static. He left the command ring uneasy. Far beyond the ship's outer hull, the void stirred. Unseen, unheard, something vast shifted in the endless dark. It had no shape that could be spoken of, no form that belonged to matter or energy. Yet it reached, gently, curiously, toward the spark of human light that dared to drift through its domain. Inside the ardent path, dreams began to change. Crew members woke in the night, sweating, whispering of voices calling from behind the stars. Infants cried at nothing. Sensors flickered with readings that made no sense, signals echoing from directions where no light had ever come. Oren lay in his bunk, eyes open, listening to the sound of the ship's lungs, the soft rhythm of recycled air, the faint vibration of life support. He tried to sleep, but his mind replayed the moment in the coolant chamber, the impossible reflection, the silence that followed. When his door chimed, he sat up. "Come in," he said. The door slid aside, revealing a young officer, pale, tense, her uniform unbuttoned at the collar. "Technician Vale, you're needed in the observation dome. There's something you need to see." He rose, still half-dressed, and followed her through the corridors. The dome was a chamber of glass at the ship's highest point, where navigators once charted courses by starlight. Now it was mostly ceremonial, a place for remembrance, for staring at infinity. Several officers were already there, gathered around the central console. The glass canopy above displayed a panorama of the stars ahead, but tonight, those stars were not as they should have been. A shape loomed in the distance, faint, vast, shimmering like heat distortion. It was not a planet or a nebula. It was something else, a presence. Oren stepped closer. "What are we looking at?" "No idea," said one officer. "It appeared 2 hours ago. The scanners can't classify it. It's emitting a signal, but it's not any language we know." The signal crackled through the speakers, a pattern of tones rising and falling, almost melodic but too complex for music. Beneath it, Oren thought he could hear something else, a rhythm like a heartbeat. He leaned closer to the glass. For a moment, the shimmer seemed to pulse in sync with his own pulse. Then it spoke not through sound, but through thought. "We remember you." Oren staggered back. The others looked at him, startled. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" said the young officer. "The voice." It said. He stopped. Their blank faces told him they'd heard nothing. He stared back at the distant shimmer. It was moving now, slowly, purposefully, not toward the ardent path, but around it, encircling it, like a predator studying its prey. The comm systems crackled again, this time with Isha's voice. "All crew, stand by. We're registering massive energy fluctuations off the port bow. Navigation, adjust course 3 degrees starboard. Oren, get to engineering immediately." He ran. By the time he reached the engineering core, alarms were blaring. Power readings spiked across the consoles. The heart of the ship, a sphere of spinning plasma encased in magnetic fields, was throbbing with wild light. Isha was already there, shouting orders. "Stabilize the containment rings. If they breach, we lose the core." Oren joined her, fingers flying across manual controls. "The flux isn't coming from inside, it's external interference. From that thing out there, I'd bet my last breath on it." The entire ship shuddered, metal screamed, lights flickered and went out. For a heartbeat, the world was nothing but darkness and vibration. Then the emergency lighting came on, painting everything in crimson. Oren's eyes widened as the readings on the nearest console began to rewrite themselves, not numbers, but symbols. Patterns forming words in a language no human had ever seen. Isha stared at it. "What is that?" Oren swallowed. "I think it's trying to talk." The symbols pulsed. The air hummed. The ship's core brightened to blinding white. And then, as suddenly as it began, everything went still. The hum faded. The alarms stopped. The lights returned to their normal hue. Oren and Isha exchanged a long, shaken look. "What just happened?" she whispered. Oren turned toward the core. At its center, within the sphere of light, something glimmered, a shape, faint and fluid, like a figure made of stars. It hovered there for a moment, then dissolved. Oren said softly, "I think we've just been found." Outside the ardent path, the vast presence drifted closer, unseen by most instruments, but felt in every living pulse aboard the ship. For the first time in generations, humanity had not just looked into the dark had looked back, and it remembered them. For the next 30 hours, the ardent path floated in the slow silence of recalibration. The engineers worked in shifts, rebalancing magnetic fields, checking the containment arrays, and tracing every circuit that had flickered during the surge. The ship had survived, but no one knew how. According to the readouts, the core should have ruptured from the energy spike. It had not only remained stable, it had strengthened. Power reserves had doubled. Thermal loss had fallen to near zero. The impossible had occurred. Oren Vale had not slept since it happened. He sat at his workstation, hands clasped, staring at the display that still carried the strange markings burned into the interface. The system had tried to erase them, but fragments lingered, flowing symbols that twisted like living calligraphy. He had run pattern analysis, translation programs, even ancient linguistic cross-references from humanity's archives. None of them could parse it. It was as though the symbols refused to be captured. They shifted whenever the system tried to measure them. Isha Lorne entered quietly, a tablet in hand. She set it down on the console beside him. "Latest diagnostics," she said. "All systems green. The ship is healthier than it's been in 100 years." "Because of that thing," Oren murmured. "Whatever it was." Isha nodded slowly. "Our astronomers still cannot classify it. They say it is not a ship, not a star, not even matter as we understand it. It radiates no heat, yet it emits structure, ordered motion, as if it were thinking." Oren looked up at her. "You think it was trying to help us?" "I do not know. It could have destroyed us, yet it did not. That alone is reason to wonder." He turned back to the flickering symbols. "It said something to me, not through the comm, not through sound. It spoke in my head. It said, 'We remember you.'" Isha studied him. "You're certain?" "I wish I were not." She folded her arms. "Keep that between us for now. The last thing we need is panic. The Council is already demanding explanations." "The Council will get data," Oren said bitterly, not understanding. Isha's eyes softened, but only slightly. Do you think you can replicate the conditions that caused the contact? He hesitated. You mean talk to it again? If we can communicate, we might learn what it wants. He stared at the glowing core through the viewing glass. Its light pulsed like a heartbeat. What if it does not want anything? What if it simply is? What if we are insects crawling across something too vast to notice us? Then we are lucky it did not step on us. He gave a weary half-smile. I'll see what I can do. In the following days, rumors spread through the decks. People whispered of the light that had filled the ship, of the visions seen in dreams, of loved ones who swore they had heard voices calling their names from the stars. The priests of the renewal cult began holding gatherings in the Arboretum, proclaiming that the ardent path had reached the boundary between the human and the divine. Attendance tripled overnight. For most of the crew, the strange event brought fear. For others, hope. To Oren, it brought neither. It brought questions. He spent his hours in the lower conduits, tracing electromagnetic fluctuations, cross-referencing data with the core's energy patterns. The symbols continued to appear sporadically on his instruments, short bursts, like fragments of thought. One evening, as he adjusted the harmonic regulators, he noticed a low vibration running through the deck. It was different from the ship's usual hum, subtler, deeper, almost like a whisper beneath hearing. He followed it through the corridors until he reached the observation dome. The stars outside were motionless. The vast shimmer that had surrounded them before was gone. But as he stared, he realized something else. The stars themselves had shifted, slightly. Their positions were wrong, their alignments off by fractions. It should have taken centuries for that much drift, but it had happened in days. Oren keyed the console. The navigational computer confirmed it. They were no longer in mapped space. He stood frozen, the truth sinking in. The ardent path had moved. Not through thrust or warp, but through something else entirely. It was as though the universe had been folded around them. He pressed the intercom. Isha, you need to see this. Within minutes she arrived, still in her engineering uniform, face taut. What is it? He pointed to the screen. We've jumped. Look at the coordinates. She leaned over the console. That's impossible. The drive was offline. Not for what moved us, Oren said quietly. Outside the viewport, a faint glow began to form, a ripple across the black. It grew until it filled the horizon. It was not light as they knew it, but something purer, more deliberate, like intelligence made visible. I think it wants to talk again, Oren whispered. The glow pulsed. The ship's systems reacted instantly, lights dimming, gravity flickering, consoles filling with those same symbols as before. The air itself seemed charged with static, raising the hair on their arms. Then, from the speakers, came a sound, not the complex tones of before, but a single resonant voice. You endure. Oren's mouth went dry. Isha, you heard that right? I heard it. The voice continued, slow and calm, each word resonating directly into the bones. Long have you drifted. Long have you sought the edge. You are not forgotten. Isha stepped forward. Who are you? The lights flickered. The voice responded, not in tone, but in emotion that pressed against their minds. We were the first to step beyond. We built the bridges between suns. We fell into the sea of silence and became memory. You carry our spark. Oren frowned. You're saying we're descended from you? The voice pulsed again. You are what remains when memory becomes flesh. Then, suddenly, a surge of data poured through the ship's systems. Screens overflowed with patterns, calculations, star charts, equations that defied current science. The ardent path trembled as if filled with new breath. Isha tried to stabilize the feeds. It's giving us, I don't even know what this is. Knowledge, Oren said. It's giving us knowledge. The voice echoed one last time. Use it. The gate awaits. Then the glow vanished. The systems steadied. The stars returned to stillness. For several seconds, neither spoke. The quiet felt enormous. Finally, Isha said, record everything. Every trace, every byte. We need the council. The council gathered in the ship's great assembly chamber, a circular hall of glass and metal at the ship's center, where artificial sunlight spilled from the ceiling. Representatives from every division sat in tiers: agriculture, navigation, security, education. At the highest seat sat Chancellor Merath Halden, an elder with eyes like cold light. Oren and Isha stood before them, data tablets in hand. Behind them, a projection displayed the alien symbols and the recorded voice. When the recording ended, silence hung heavy. Chancellor Halden spoke first. "You claim a sentient entity contacted us and transmitted this information?" "Yes," said Isha. "We verified the recordings. The data was not generated by any human system." A counselor from navigation leaned forward. "This gate it mentioned, do you know what it refers to?" Oren replied. "We believe it may be a structure or phenomenon near our current coordinates. The entity moved us across space. It might expect us to continue toward this destination." Another counselor, a woman from security, frowned. "Or it might be leading us into a trap." Isha met her gaze. "If it wanted us destroyed, we would not be standing here." "Unless destruction requires our cooperation," the woman retorted. The Chancellor raised a hand, silencing the murmur that followed. "Enough. Whether this being means harm or not, we cannot ignore what has happened. We must investigate the coordinates provided." Oren hesitated. "With respect, Chancellor, the ship's people are already unsettled. If they learn we are following instructions from something we do not understand, they will obey," Halden said coldly. "They have no choice." The chamber fell still again. Finally, Halden said, "Technician Vale, Overseer Lorne, you will lead the expedition to these coordinates. If there is indeed a gate, we will see it with our own eyes." Oren's gut tightened. "And if it is not what it seems, then we will decide what humanity becomes next." Preparations began immediately. Navigation recalibrated the drives using the data the entity had given them. To everyone's astonishment, the modifications increased efficiency tenfold. The old engines hummed with renewed vigor. The ardent path felt young again, but not everyone welcomed the change. In the lower decks, the renewal cult began proclaiming that the voice from the stars was divine revelation, that the gate was the passage to transcendence promised in ancient scripture. They gathered in corridors, chanting prayers of ascension. Security tried to disperse them, but belief spreads faster than law. Oren avoided the gatherings, focusing on his work, yet he could not shake the memory of that voice. It had not felt divine nor malicious. It had felt mournful. On the eve of departure, he stood once more in the observation dome. The stars ahead were faint and far apart, scattered like dust over an endless table. He spoke softly, as if the void could hear him. "What are you?" The reflection in the glass shifted. For an instant, a shape appeared, a figure of light, human but fluid, standing behind him. "We were what you will become," it said gently, "if you remember." He spun around. The dome was empty. When he looked back at the glass, the figure was gone, leaving only the reflection of his own uncertain face. The journey to the coordinates lasted 6 days. The ship glided through a region of space that sensors could barely map, a void without cosmic radiation, as though the laws of physics themselves hesitated there. Lights dimmed inexplicably. Power fluxed. Crew reported feeling watched, even in their sleep. On the 6th day, the ship's forward scanners detected a structure. At first it looked like a cloud. Then, as they drew closer, it resolved into geometry, vast, impossible geometry, folding and refolding like crystalline wings. It stretched across half the visible horizon, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed alive. The gate. Oren and Isha stood together on the command deck as it came into full view. Even the most hardened officers fell silent before it. It was not merely a construct, it was a statement. "Isha," Oren whispered, "do you feel that?" She nodded slowly. "It's humming, not through sound, through everything." Chancellor Halden's voice came through the intercom. "Prepare the probe. We will not risk the ship until we know it is safe." The launch bay opened, and a small drone vessel detached from the hull, gliding toward the gate. Its lights blinked steadily, transmitting telemetry back to the command deck. As it neared the surface, the patterns on the gate shifted, aligning themselves. A corridor of light opened, welcoming the drone in. Then the readings spiked, gravity, energy, time dilation, all beyond scale. The connection severed, the drone vanished. Gasps filled the deck. Isha checked the instruments. It's gone, no debris, no signal. Oren exhaled. Maybe it passed through. To where? He looked at the gate's radiant corridor. Only one way to find out. Halden's voice returned, sharp and decisive. Prepare the main engines. We go through. The bridge crew froze. Isha turned toward the speaker. Chancellor, that's reckless. We do not know what's on the other side. We were sent here for a reason, Halden replied. If there is a path to salvation, we will take it. Oren said quietly, and if it's extinction, then at least it will be our choice. The order stood, engines roared, the ardent path began to move. The closer they drew, the stronger the vibration became, not sound, but resonance. Every metal surface thrummed like a drum, every human heart beat in unison with it. Some crew fell to their knees, weeping or praying, others stared in wonder. The gate opened wider. Oren stood at his station, eyes fixed on the swirling light ahead. He could feel it touching his mind, reaching for memory, searching. He whispered, if you remember us, show us mercy. The ardent path entered the gate. For an instant that stretched into eternity, everything stopped, time, sound, motion. Every atom seemed to dissolve into light. Then reality snapped back. They emerged into a sky filled not with stars, but with rivers of luminous matter flowing through darkness. Worlds hung suspended like lanterns in a vast sea. It was a place beyond maps, beyond reason, a realm built of thought and energy intertwined. Oren could only stare. We're not in our universe anymore. Isha's voice trembled. Then where are we? A whisper filled the ship, both inside and out. Home. The ardent path drifted into the radiant sea, and behind them the gate began to close. No one spoke for a long time. The ardent path drifted in that luminous expanse like a single grain of dust caught in sunlight. Every viewport was filled with the sight of rivers of light, vast currents that flowed through space as if the universe itself had veins. Each current shimmered with color no eye had ever seen before, hues that seemed to slide between perception, teasing the mind with impressions of meaning rather than pigment. It felt alive. Oren Vale stood on the command deck beside Isha Lorne, his hands braced against the railing. Every instrument hummed with readings that defied comprehension. Gravitational waves formed patterns of rhythm, magnetic fields oscillated like breathing. The air in the ship carried an electric scent, sharp and metallic, as though the hull itself drank from the unknown energy around it. We crossed into something, Isha said at last. Not another system, not even another dimension. It's more like inside a thought. Oren looked at her. You're saying this place is alive? She hesitated. Alive may not be the right word. Conscious, perhaps, a field of awareness. Behind them, the bridge crew worked in hushed awe, whispering measurements and recalibrations. The Chancellor had not yet spoken. He stood at the center dais, staring through the main viewport. His face was pale and rigid, as if afraid to blink and miss the moment humanity surpassed itself. At last he said, "Is the ship stable?" "Yes, Chancellor," one officer replied. "All systems reading nominal, power flow steady. Then we proceed, chart everything. We will be the first humans to map a place beyond creation." Oren muttered under his breath, "If it even can be mapped." The Chancellor turned toward him. "Technician Vale, your tone is noted." Oren met his gaze. "With respect, Chancellor, we have no idea what physics we are dealing with. We could be moving through an environment that obeys will rather than law." "Then we will learn its laws," Halden said. "That is what humanity does." He turned back to the viewport. Isha gave Oren a small warning look, but he barely noticed. He was staring at something forming along the horizon, structures rising from the luminous rivers like towers of crystal. They spiraled upward, connected by bridges of light that shimmered like liquid glass. Each tower pulsed with an inner rhythm, the same rhythm that now seemed to echo faintly in Oren's skull. He blinked. For an instant, he saw shapes moving between the towers, humanoid, radiant, their forms flickering as though half-remembered. "Isha," he whispered, "look there." She followed his gaze, her breath caught. "They're waiting." The ardent path approached the crystalline city. Its towers reached impossible heights, curving gracefully as if grown rather than built. The closer they came, the more detail resolved, runes carved in surfaces of pure light, flowing patterns that shifted with every glance. The city floated above a vast plain of luminescent mist. There was no sun, yet everything glowed with gentle radiance. When they entered the outer perimeter, the ship systems began responding without command. Thrusters aligned, guidance protocols activated on their own. The vessel slowed and descended toward an open platform of interlocking hexagons that expanded to match its size. "We're being guided," Isha said. Oren checked the controls. "Not guided, welcomed." The ship touched down with a smoothness no human pilot could have achieved. The vibrations ceased. Silence returned, but it was not emptiness. It was expectant. Then came the voice. "Children of dust, you have crossed the boundary." It filled the air, resonating from every direction, neither male nor female, but vast. The crew froze at their stations. Some dropped to their knees, others clutched at their heads as the sound pressed into their thoughts. Isha stepped forward. "We hear you." "Who are you?" The light in the towers intensified, coalescing above the platform into a single figure. It was tall, slender, and made of shifting radiance, its features vague but graceful. Within its chest burned a star. "We are the echo of the first forge," the being said. "We are memory given shape, guardians of what was left behind." Oren's voice shook. "Left behind by whom?" "By those who made the road you travel, by your ancestors before memory fractured." The Chancellor found his voice. "You claim to know our origin?" The figure turned its faceless head toward him. "Not claim. No, humanity was born of us, and we of the stars before time. You carry the spark of the forge in your blood, though it has dimmed through distance and forgetting." Isha stepped beside Oren. "You said we crossed a boundary. Between what and what?" "Between the realm of matter and the realm of pattern. The place your kind call reality is but a shadow cast by this plane. Every law you know is an echo of what begins here." Oren whispered, "And why bring us here?" The light flickered gently, almost like amusement. "Because you were ready to ask." They were escorted from the ship by strands of light that shaped themselves into walkways leading down from the landing platform. Each step resonated faintly, as if remembering every foot that had ever walked it. The crew followed hesitantly, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. Oren walked near the front with Isha, their helmets sealed though the air outside tested clean. The crystalline towers loomed around them, humming softly, the radiant being drifted ahead like a guide. "I keep expecting to wake up," Isha said quietly. "Maybe we did," Oren replied. "Maybe this is the dream of something older than the universe." They reached a vast hall at the city's center, its interior filled with shifting light forms, figures engaged in motionless tableaus, frozen mid-gesture. Oren realized with awe that they were not statues. They were memories, recordings made solid. The guide gestured toward them. "These are those who came before. When the forge still burned, they shaped worlds with thought and light. They taught the first wanderers, the ancestors of your kind." Oren approached one of the figures. It resembled a human, but taller, its proportions elegant, its eyes twin stars. Its hand was extended, palm upward, as though offering something invisible. He asked softly, "If we were their students, what happened to them?" The guide's light dimmed. They reached the end of knowing. In seeking to understand all things, they unraveled themselves. Their essence dissolved into the field you now walk within. We remain to remember and to guide those who still carry their flame. "Their flame," Isha murmured. "You mean consciousness, the will to endure, the defiance against the void. That is the legacy of the forge." Oren looked around at the radiant hall, at the remnants of a civilization that had turned itself into memory. "If that's true, then humanity's purpose is to, what? Continue their work, finish what they started." The guide inclined its luminous head. "Every spark seeks to grow. The question is what you will become when you reach your end." He felt a chill. "And if we make the same mistake, then perhaps your children will learn from the ashes of your light." Before he could reply, another figure entered the hall, smaller, dimmer, but distinct. Its light flickered irregularly, as though it struggled to hold form. The first guide turned toward it. You have been silent for long cycles, Keeper. The smaller being's voice trembled because silence was safer. But now the path has opened again. You risk awakening the hollow. Isha frowned. The hollow? The Keeper turned toward her. Its light pulsed sharply, the absence that followed the fall, the void that devours memory. It sleeps beyond the boundaries of the forge, waiting for minds to call it. The first guide replied calmly, it cannot cross unless summoned. And yet these new ones have crossed unguarded, the Keeper said. They shine too brightly, the hollow will see. Oren felt his stomach tighten. You mean we've attracted its attention? The Keeper's gaze, if it could be called that, fell upon him. You are a beacon in its dark. It will come. Back on the ardent path, alarms soon proved the Keeper right. Within hours of their arrival, systems began fluctuating again. Power surges rippled through the conduits. Instruments detected anomalies outside the city, regions where the luminous rivers dimmed, turning to shadow. The shadows spread, swallowing light like ink in water. Oren raced through the corridors toward the engine core, barking orders to the technicians. Route excess power to the shields, keep the containment stable. The ship shuddered as invisible forces pressed against it. Through the viewports, the once radiant horizon now writhed with blackness. Isha's voice came through the intercom. The guides are evacuating the outer rings. They say the hollow is breaching. Oren stared at the readings, void signatures expanding geometrically. Then we need to leave now. The Chancellor's command voice cut through the chaos. We cannot leave. This is humanity's birthright. Birthright or not, Oren snapped. We'll die here if we stay. He slammed the emergency ignition. The engines roared to life, drawing on the alien energy of the realm. The ship lifted from the platform. Outside, the crystalline towers began to crumble, their light consumed by advancing shadow. From within the darkness came movement, tendrils of nothingness coiling toward the ship. They were not matter, not energy, but the absence of both. Wherever they touched, existence unraveled. The radiant guide appeared at the viewport, its form flickering wildly. Go, children of dust. The gate still remembers your passage. We will hold the hollow as long as we can. Oren shouted over the alarms. We don't even know if the gate still leads home. Then make a new home from what remains, the being cried. The ardent path surged upward, engines blazing with stolen light. The darkness followed, swallowing everything behind them. The luminous city vanished in a tide of void. The gate appeared ahead, smaller now, flickering like a dying flame. Its geometry twisted, unstable. Isha clutched the control rail. If that collapses before we reach it, then we improvise, Oren said grimly. Hold the course. The hollow's tendrils lashed against the hull. Metal screamed. Systems overloaded. Whole sections went dark, but the ship pushed forward, drawn by the last remnant of light. They crossed the threshold just as the gate imploded. Light swallowed everything. When consciousness returned, Oren found himself lying on the deck of the command bridge. Smoke filled the air. The lights were dim. Sparks flickered from broken panels. He coughed, pushing himself up. Isha, he called. She groaned from beside a console, clutching her arm. Still here. Around them, crew members stirred, dazed but alive. Through the viewport, a familiar sight greeted them. Stars, ordinary, steady stars. They were home, or so it seemed. Navigation? Oren asked hoarsely. An officer checked the systems. We are not sure. Star patterns don't match any known region. Isha frowned. So we're still lost. Not lost, Oren said quietly, staring at the stars, just somewhere new. A faint glow drifted past the viewport, small motes of light, like embers floating in zero gravity. They swirled around the ship gently, almost playfully. He recognized them, the same hue as the guides from the city. Isha whispered, they made it through. The motes clustered near the hull, merging into faint patterns, symbols like those that had once filled the consoles. They pulsed softly, as if breathing. Oren reached out, pressing his hand to the glass. Are you still with us? For a heartbeat, the symbols aligned into words. Endure. Then they faded. In the weeks that followed, the ardent path resumed its voyage through the unknown region. The ship's systems had changed, new efficiencies, strange harmonics in the engines, technologies that seemed to repair themselves. Whatever knowledge the Forge had given them, it remained integrated, alive. The Council tried to restore order, declaring the expedition a success. Official logs recorded that they had encountered a benevolent energy phenomenon and secured new methods of propulsion. No mention of the Hollow, no mention of the beings of light, no mention of the truth, but among the crew, whispers persisted that something had followed them through the gate, something unseen, waiting in the quiet between the stars. Oren often walked the corridors at night, listening. The ship felt different now, heavier with unseen presence. Sometimes when he passed the observation dome, he thought he saw faint reflections behind him, shapes of light, watching. One night, as he stood alone before the stars, he heard the voice again, not external but inside his mind. The Hollow sleeps, but it learns. Keep the flame, he whispered back, I will. And for a moment, he could have sworn he felt warmth brush his shoulder, like the touch of a hand made of light. The ardent path sailed on, carrying the last children of dust toward whatever future awaited them. Behind, the gate lay shattered, the luminous realm lost. But in the hearts of those who had seen it, a new certainty burned. Humanity was not alone in the universe. They were part of a legacy that reached beyond stars, beyond time, beyond even death, a legacy of endurance. And somewhere, in the unseen depths where light met void, the Hollow turned in its sleep and remembered their names. The ardent path moved through the new region of space with quiet determination. Though every gauge and dial read steady, the crew carried an unease that no mechanical stability could dispel. They had left something behind that words could not describe, something radiant and terrible, and in its place came the feeling of unseen eyes following every heartbeat. Oren Vale had grown used to the sound of his boots against metal, but now even that rhythm seemed heavier. The corridors felt narrower, the hum of the engines deeper. It was as though the ship itself listened. When he placed his hand against the walls, he could feel vibrations that should not have been there, pulses slower than the generators, softer than human machinery. A different kind of life had taken root in the hull. In the main engineering bay, Isha Lawn stood over the power core. The core had changed since their return. The plasma sphere within no longer glowed only blue-white, but shimmered in layers of gold and silver as though reflecting unseen stars. When it pulsed, the light danced across the entire chamber, illuminating faces drawn with exhaustion and wonder. Oren approached, setting his tools on the console. You have been here since dawn. Isha nodded absently, her eyes never leaving the core. It hums differently now. The field harmonics rewrite themselves every few hours. I have stopped trying to calculate the frequency. It moves like thought. He leaned beside her. Any sign of instability? None. In fact, the opposite. Efficiency is increasing every day. It feels like the ship is healing itself. Oren studied her face. She was not afraid, merely distant, as if her mind were half elsewhere. You have been dreaming again, have you not? She gave him a weary look. Yes. The light, she nodded. Every night, I see the city again, but it is empty. The towers are cold. Then something stirs beneath them, as though the memory of the Hollow waits beneath the stone. Oren's voice softened. They said the Hollow could not cross. They also said the gate would hold. She folded her arms. Sometimes I wonder if we carried a fragment of it back with us. Before Oren could respond, a chime echoed through the intercom, the council's summoning tone. A voice followed, formal and clipped. Technician Vale, Overseer Lawn, report to the council chamber immediately. Oren exhaled. What now? The chamber was dim when they entered, its usual brightness replaced by low amber light. Chancellor Halden sat at the head of the long table, his expression unreadable. Around him were the senior councillors, their faces drawn in tense concentration. Holographic projections shimmered above the table, maps of the surrounding space, clusters of anomalies, and a central symbol that pulsed like a heartbeat. Halden gestured for them to sit. We have detected something. Oren studied the projection. A signal, a structure, Halden said. Roughly 2 days, travel from our current position. Our long-range sensors picked it up at the edge of the new region. It is large, larger than the ardent path by an order of magnitude. Isha frowned. Artificial? Yes, its energy signature matches certain patterns we recorded in the Forge realm before the collapse, but it is darker, less stable. We believe it may be a remnant of whatever the Hollow left behind. The chamber fell silent. Halden's voice hardened. We will investigate. Oren blinked. After what happened last time, this is not a matter of choice, Halden said. If it is a remnant of that power, it could be both a threat and an opportunity. We cannot risk leaving it behind us. Humanity's survival depends on understanding what remains. Isha leaned forward, or on staying away from it. Halden's gaze turned sharp. Fear never carried our kind through the stars. Prepare a reconnaissance mission. Oren felt anger stir. With respect, Chancellor, you are gambling with all of us. Halden's voice was quiet, but cold enough to silence the room. We have already gambled by existing. Dismissed. The reconnaissance shuttle launched 12 hours later. Oren and Isha were aboard, accompanied by a small team of specialists. The shuttle, Wayfarer's Reach, was a compact vessel of reinforced alloy, equipped with every sensor the ship could spare. As it detached from the ardent path, Oren watched the mother vessel shrink behind them until it was a silver needle against the stars. The journey passed mostly in silence. The stars grew fewer, replaced by strange, faintly luminous threads in the void. The region ahead seemed dimmer, as if light itself hesitated to exist there. When they arrived, the structure awaited them, monstrous and quiet. It resembled a cathedral built from fractured mirrors, suspended in emptiness. Its surface absorbed more light than it reflected, and its edges bent space around them, causing instruments to stutter. Massive archways opened into black corridors that led nowhere visible. A faint pulse ran through it, like the heartbeat of a dying creature. Oren whispered, "It's dead." Isha shook her head. "No, it's dreaming." They brought the shuttle closer. The hull sensors crackled. The structure's surface reacted, rippling faintly as though aware of their presence. As they neared one of the archways, their lights reflected off what seemed to be glass, but beneath that glass moved shapes. Humanoid shapes, countless. Oren's voice was low. "Are those?" "Yes," Isha said. "Figures, frozen like the ones in the forge." But these were not radiant. They were dark silhouettes, their features eroded. Every one of them faced outward toward the void, as if guarding the silence. Oren felt his throat tighten. They looked like shadows of the guides. Isha adjusted the scanners. Their energy reads inverted, same structure, opposite polarity, like reflection and void. He remembered the Keeper's warning, "You shine too brightly, the Hollow will see." Suddenly the instruments flared. A surge of power rippled through the shuttle. The figures in the glass turned their heads. Oren shouted, "Back away." The pilot reversed thrusters, but the structure pulsed, dragging them closer with invisible force. The dark figures pressed against the glass, their forms stretching unnaturally. A sound rose through the hull, a deep, hungry vibration. Isha gritted her teeth. "It's feeding on our energy. Shut everything down," Oren ordered. The lights flickered out. The shuttle drifted, powerless in silence. Then slowly the grip released. The figures withdrew. The archway dimmed. Oren exhaled. "We're alive." Isha spoke quietly. "It knows us now." Back aboard the ardent path, the council gathered once more to hear their report. Oren stood before them, face drawn with fatigue. "You went too close," Halden said, though his voice carried no triumph. "You provoked it." "We did nothing," Oren replied. "It reached for us the moment we came near. That thing is not dead, it's waiting." Halden's eyes glinted. "Waiting for what?" "For light," Isha said. "It feeds on it. Every signal, every current. That structure is a wound. And the more we touch it, the wider it opens." The Chancellor studied them both, then spoke quietly. "And yet, despite the danger, you came back alive. Perhaps there is something to learn." Oren's patience snapped. "You are going to kill us all chasing your curiosity." Halden rose slowly from his seat. "Curiosity built every ship that carried us here. It built the ardent path. It is the only reason we exist." Oren stepped closer. "Then maybe it is time we learn to survive instead of conquer." The chamber went still. Halden's gaze locked with his, unblinking. Technician Vale, you are dismissed from field duty, effective immediately. Oren's fists clenched, but Isha placed a hand on his arm, her silent plea holding him back. He turned and left the chamber without another word. Days passed. The council began assembling an expedition team to return to the structure without Oren. The ship buzzed with divided voices, some loyal to Halden's command, others fearful of his ambition. Rumors spread of technicians who heard whispering through the walls, of light that dimmed when no one watched. The ardent path was becoming haunted. Oren worked alone in the lower decks, repairing conduits by hand, yet the hum beneath the metal no longer sounded like machinery. It was almost like breath. One night he felt a sudden chill in the air. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. He turned and froze. A figure stood in the corridor, a man-shaped silhouette, blacker than shadow, edges blurred as though made of smoke. Where its eyes should have been, faint embers glowed. Oren's hand went instinctively to the emitter wand, though he knew it would be useless. "What are you?" The figure tilted its head. When it spoke, the words were not heard but felt, pressing against his mind. "You carried us back." Oren's voice shook. The hollow is many. You are light that fled the forge. We are what was left when light died." It took a step closer. The metal beneath its feet froze with frost that shimmered black. Oren backed away. "Why follow us?" "Because you remember. Memory is warmth. We hunger for it." It raised a hand. The corridor darkened, sound fading. Oren felt his own memories pulling at him, faces, voices, fragments of his childhood being drawn out like smoke. He gasped. No, a burst of white light filled the passage, forcing the shadow back. Isha stood at the far end, her hand extended, a crystalline device in her grip, the same relic she had brought from the forge's ruins. Its light burned pure and steady. The shadow hissed and dissolved, fading into vapor. Oren slumped against the wall, breath ragged. "You followed me," she hurried to him. "I felt it moving through the circuits. It's not just here, it's in the ship." He looked up at her. "Then it's already too late." That night, emergency sirens wailed across the decks. Power grids failed one by one. Darkness spread through the ship like infection. The hollow had found its way inside. Crew scrambled through flickering corridors, armed with plasma cutters and arc lamps. The shadows grew thicker, swallowing light. From within them, shapes moved, familiar faces twisted by absence. Oren and Isha led a small group toward the core, where the last of the power still burned. The air vibrated with a deep, mournful hum. When they reached the chamber, they stopped. The core was surrounded by darkness, but at its center floated a single point of golden light, the remnant of the forge's energy. It pulsed weakly, fighting to remain. Oren turned to the others. "If we lose this, we lose everything, every memory, every person." Isha's eyes met his. "Then we protect it." They formed a circle around the core, activating emergency fields. The light brightened slightly. The shadows recoiled but did not retreat. Whispers filled the air, fragments of voices from their past, tempting, pleading. Oren closed his eyes, remembering the radiant being's words, "Keep the flame." He stepped toward the light, feeling its warmth against his skin. "You said we were made to endure," he whispered. "Then let us prove it." He pressed his hands to the core. The light surged. It flowed through him, searing, endless, ancient. He saw the memories of humanity's rise, the first stars colonized, the worlds lost, the generations born aboard ships that forgot the sky. He felt every joy and every despair, all the persistence that defined their kind. And beyond it all, the faint echo of the forge itself, still alive, still waiting. When the surge passed, the darkness screamed. The shadows evaporated, torn apart by brilliance. The ship trembled, then stilled. Systems flickered back to life. The hum returned, steady, strong. Oren collapsed. Isha caught him, her hands trembling. "You did it." He managed a faint smile. "We did." Behind them, the core pulsed steadily, golden light washing the chamber. For the first time since they had left the forge, the ship felt clean. But in the depths of space, unseen beyond the hull, something vast and patient stirred once more. The hollow was not destroyed. It had merely learned. The ardent path drifted in silence for a full rotation before anyone dared speak above a whisper. The corridors smelled of heated metal and smoke, Yet beneath that tang was something unfamiliar, clean air. The darkness that had haunted the decks seemed gone, washed away by the surge of light from the core. Crew members moved like survivors of a storm, blinking into brightness they had forgotten could exist. Oren Vale awoke in the infirmary with his body aching and his vision clouded. The ceiling above him was white, not the dull grey of recycled metal, but clean, radiant white. For a long moment, he thought he was still dreaming. Then Isha Lorne appeared beside his bed. Her hair was tied back, her face drawn by exhaustion, but her eyes, those steel-grey eyes, carried a glint of quiet relief. She placed a cup of water in his hands. "You have been asleep for 2 days," she said softly. Oren's throat felt dry. 2 days, she nodded. "You pushed yourself too far." The energy surge almost tore your nervous system apart. He drank slowly, his hands trembling slightly, but the ship lives, power levels are stable again, the Hollow's presence has withdrawn for now. Her words settled on him like a fragile promise. "For now," he echoed, "you think it will return." "I know it will," she said simply, "but we will be ready next time." Oren managed a faint smile. "You always say that, because I always intend to mean it." She turned away to adjust the monitors, but Oren saw the strain in her shoulders, the weight of someone holding back fear through sheer will. "What happened after the surge?" he asked. "The light you released spread through the ship like a pulse. It burned away the infection in the systems, sealed fractures in the conduits. Even the life support filters cleared themselves. But there was something else, something we cannot explain." He frowned. "What?" The ship's trajectory shifted on its own. The engines reoriented without command input. When we checked the navigation charts, the course pointed toward a new region of space, a destination we never programmed. Oren sat up, pain flaring through his chest. "It's leading us somewhere." "Yes, and I think it is using your resonance to guide it." He stared at her. "My what?" "When you connected with the core, it imprinted you. The energy signature in your body matches the harmonic pattern of the core itself. It responds to you now." Oren laughed weakly. "So now I'm part of the ship." "In a sense, yes." Isha hesitated, then added, "The Council believes this may be the Forge's doing, a kind of beacon. They intend to follow it." Oren's smile faded. "Halden will not stop until he finds what lies beyond." "Perhaps he should not stop," she said quietly. "Perhaps there is something we were meant to see." He studied her face, but said nothing. The new course carried the ardent path into an expanse unlike any they had charted. The stars here burned cooler, their light veiled by faint clouds of luminescent dust. Space itself seemed thicker, as though filled with unseen threads weaving between points of light. Oren returned to duty, though now wherever he went, the systems responded subtly to his presence. Lights brightened when he approached, doors slid open before he touched them. The crew whispered about it, half in reverence, half in unease. One night, as he inspected the outer spine, the ship whispered back, not through sound, but through a low vibration that resonated in his bones. "We see you." He froze, his breath caught. "Who's there?" he whispered. "The memory of light endures." He turned slowly, scanning the dim corridor. Nothing, only the steady pulse of the conduits. "You carried us," the voice continued, "not dark like the hollow, but deep and luminous. You are the spark that remains." He recognized it then, the tone, the presence. It was the Forge speaking through the heart of the ship. He placed his hand against the wall. "Why guide us here?" "Because the wound still bleeds. The hollow was born from the first fire. What was forged in brilliance must face its own shadow." He frowned. "And what do you want of me?" "To remember." The pulse faded. The corridor fell silent once more. By the next rotation, the ardent path reached the edge of a vast nebula. It glowed in shades of violet and silver, its tendrils stretching across space like living streams of energy. Within its depths, something massive pulsed, a faint beacon of rhythmic light. Halden stood on the command deck, his gaze fixed on the main viewport. "That," he said, pointing to the beacon, "is our destination." Oren joined him. "You don't even know what it is." Halden's eyes gleamed with the feverish light of conviction. "It is calling to us." The same energy that healed the ship emanates from that source. It could be the forge itself. Isha, standing nearby, folded her arms, or it could be another remnant of the hollow masking itself. Halden's tone was calm but absolute. We will find out. Prepare for descent. The ship entered the nebula. Gaseous light swept across the hull, coating it in shifting hues. The sensors struggled to interpret the readings. The density of energy was unlike anything known. Static whispered through every channel. Oren gripped the rail as turbulence rocked the deck. Hull integrity holding. Stable, said Isha, but the field pressure is increasing. We are being drawn inward. The beacon ahead grew brighter, expanding until it filled the entire viewport. Within that glow, structures took shape, vast rings of metallic lattice, orbiting around a core of living light. It was not a star, but something made to mimic one. The architecture spanned entire worlds, intricate and ancient. Halden whispered, almost reverently, "The Crucible of Dawn." No one knew how he recognized the name, but it fit. The crucible hung suspended in the nebula's heart, pulsing with energy that felt both welcoming and unbearable. As the ardent path approached, the ship slowed of its own accord. The lights dimmed, then steadied. The engines fell silent. Oren felt the vibration through his chest again, the same resonance as the core, amplified 1,000-fold. "It knows us," he murmured. The entire ship trembled. A beam of light extended from the crucible and touched the ardent path's hull. Every panel, every conduit, every drop of circuitry lit from within. Crew members cried out as their vision filled with light. Images flashed through their minds, glimpses of ancient cities built on starlight, of beings made from radiant energy shaping matter into harmony. The first architects of the forge. Then came ruin, the collapse of light into shadow, the birth of the hollow, the fall into division and hunger. The visions faded, the light withdrew. Halden staggered, gripping the console. "It showed us everything." Isha's voice was hoarse. "Not everything, only what it wanted us to see." Oren steadied himself. "The crucible is a memory, the birthplace of both the forge and the hollow. It's where they divided." Halden's eyes gleamed with awe. "Then perhaps it is also where we can reunite them." Oren turned sharply. "You cannot be serious." "Why not?" Halden stepped closer. "The hollow feeds on what it lacks: creation. If we merge light and dark again, we might restore the balance that was lost." "That balance destroyed an entire realm," Oren shouted. "We barely survived touching it." Halden's voice softened to a dangerous calm. "And yet we did survive. That is what makes us different." He turned to the helm. "Prepare the transfer sequence. We will channel the crucible's energy through the core." Isha's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "You will tear the ship apart." He met her gaze coldly. "I will forge it anew." Oren and Isha ran. The corridors pulsed with unstable energy, alarms wailing in uneven tones. The crew scrambled in confusion, some still entranced by the lingering visions. The ship's hum deepened to a roar. In the engineering bay, the core blazed like a miniature sun. Energy streamed through conduits toward it, energy drawn directly from the crucible. The control panels glowed with foreign symbols. Isha's voice trembled. "He is overriding the safety locks. If this continues, the containment rings will collapse." Oren's hands flew across the manual controls. "Can we sever the channel?" "Not without cutting the entire main grid." "Then do it." She hesitated. "That would kill every system aboard. Better dark than dead." Together they worked, rerouting circuits, bypassing failsafes. The ship shook violently. The core flared, flooding the room with blinding white. Through the glare, Oren thought he saw faces, not human, but radiant, watching silently. Then Halden's voice echoed through the ship's broadcast system. "Do not interfere. The fusion has already begun." Oren cursed. "He has taken command access." The decks buckled. Energy coursed through the walls like fire. The crucible's beam intensified, surrounding the ardent path completely. Isha shouted over the noise. "Oren, the only way to stop it is from the command bridge. You will have to break the link yourself." He nodded, grabbed his emitter wand, and ran. The command deck was chaos. Consoles sparked, displays fractured with cascading symbols. Halden stood at the center, arms raised toward the viewport, his face illuminated by the light of the crucible. "Oren," he shouted over the roar, "look at it. Do you not see what we can become?" Oren advanced slowly, the emitter humming in his hand. "You are going to destroy everything." Halden laughed, wild and triumphant. "Destruction and creation are the same. Humanity has always been both." "The Forge warned us," Oren said. "It told us the wound must heal, not merge." Halden's eyes glowed with reflected light. "And you would trust ghosts of light over flesh that endures?" Oren raised the emitter. "I trust what survives." He drove the wand into the central console. The shockwave tore through the deck. Circuits exploded. The connection to the crucible ruptured, severing the energy stream. Halden screamed as the beam shattered, casting fragments of light across the bridge. Oren was thrown backward. The world became fire and motion. When the noise cleared, the light was gone. Only darkness remained, lit by the dim emergency glow. Isha's voice crackled through the intercom. "Oren, the link is broken. The crucible is collapsing." He staggered to his feet, breathing hard. Halden lay unconscious beside the viewport. Outside, the vast structure began to unravel, its rings folding inward, light spilling like molten glass. Oren whispered, "It's dying." "No," said a voice inside his mind, calm, ancient. "It is beginning." The crucible imploded. A pulse of pure energy expanded outward, engulfing the ship. For an instant, every soul aboard felt weightless, suspended between light and void. Then the pulse passed through them, and the ardent path was flung clear, tumbling into the silent dark beyond the nebula. The stars returned. The crucible was gone. Oren sank to his knees, trembling. Isha's voice came faintly through the comlink. "Oren, are you there?" He looked up, eyes burning with tears he hadn't realized were falling. "Yes, we are still here." Outside the viewport, the stars burned brighter than ever before, but in their reflection, deep within his own eyes, he saw a faint shimmer, a shadow shaped like light. The hollow had not died. It had learned to wait within them. The stars beyond the viewport drifted like slow-moving embers, steady and bright against the unending dark. For the first time in many cycles, the ardent path was silent. Its engines were dormant, its hull cracked and scorched from the pulse that had hurled it beyond the nebula. The once perfect corridors now carried scars of heat and fractured glass. Yet somehow, impossibly, the ship still lived. Oren Vale stood alone at the observation dome, gazing out into the ocean of stars. The glass above him bore the faint etchings of the crucible's last light, a map of constellations that had never existed before. They shimmered when the ship's internal lights flickered, as if the universe itself had written a reminder across their sheltering sky. Behind him, the door opened. Isha Lorne entered quietly, her steps soft but sure. She carried no tools, no datapads, only a small crystalline shard that glowed faintly in her hand, cut from the remnants of the core's surge. When she spoke, her voice carried the gravity of both exhaustion and defiance. "The council has dissolved." Oren turned slowly. Halden, gone, he left the command deck before the final pulse. No one saw where. The bridge cameras burned out when the crucible collapsed. Oren nodded once. He would not have accepted what came after. Isha stepped beside him, her eyes on the distant stars. "The crew looks to you now. You are the only one the ship still answers to. That was not my choosing. It never is." She set the shard on the railing before the viewport. "We are alive because of what you did. Do not mistake survival for failure." He exhaled, his breath fogging faintly against the glass. "The hollow is not gone, Isha. I feel it, somewhere in the circuits, somewhere in us." "I know," she said. "I feel it too. The light that saved us also carried something of the dark. Perhaps that is the cost of understanding." He looked at her, searching her expression for fear. There was none, only weary acceptance. "What do we do now?" he asked. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon of stars. "We go on. That is what humans do, even when the path ahead is unknown." The following days became a rhythm of rebuilding. Teams moved through the decks, sealing breaches, recalibrating life support, cataloging what systems remained functional. The main engine arrays were beyond repair, yet the auxiliary drives still answered faintly to Oren's touch. He could feel the core's pulse when he reached for it, like a heart that beat in tandem with his own. The crew no longer spoke of fear openly. They moved with the quiet composure of those who had seen too much, yet refused to yield. Children drew stars on the walls with charcoal scavenged from burnt wiring. Elder technicians told stories in the mess hall of ancient worlds they had never seen. Life returned in the small, stubborn ways that life always does. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the ship rested, whispers lingered in the lower decks. Some swore they saw shapes move in reflections, others dreamed of voices calling from behind the stars, soft, mournful, patient. The hollow had left its echo. Oren walked those corridors often, tracing the hum of the conduits. The ship spoke to him still, though its voice had changed. It was less a vibration now, more a thought that brushed the edge of awareness, faint, questioning. One night, as he inspected a sealed bulkhead near the reactor spine, the lights dimmed and the air grew colder. The hum shifted. You endure. He froze, hand resting on the wall. Who speaks? You remember us. It was not the forge nor the hollow. The tone was both, light woven through shadow. You burned and did not break. The wound still bleeds, but the flesh around it has learned to live. Oren whispered, "What are you now?" The shape of what comes after. The joining of what was divided. He felt a surge of heat through the metal, and for an instant his vision filled with light, cities of radiance, their towers no longer empty but intertwined with vines of shadow, both alive. Harmony through contrast. Then it was gone. He sank against the wall, breathless. The ship's hum steadied once more. Isha found him there hours later, half-conscious. When he told her what he had heard, she did not question him. She only said, "Perhaps we are changing too." By the next rotation, the Ardent Path scanners detected something ahead, faint energy readings, patterned like a heartbeat. Not a star, not a nebula, something smaller, closer, a planet. Isha joined Oren at the helm as the sensors resolved the image. The world appeared blue-gray with streaks of silver cloud, orbiting a calm golden sun. Oceans glittered across its surface, and the continents shimmered faintly with mineral reflections. Oren stared in silence. "Habitable, partial atmosphere," she said, scanning. "Breathable with assistance. Temperature moderate. No signs of active civilization, though there are structures, artificial, ancient." He exhaled. "It looks familiar." "It should," she said softly. "Its surface composition matches fragments of the data recovered from the forge. This may have been one of their first experiments, a place shaped by both light and matter." He turned to her. "A remnant world, or a new beginning." The ship descended through the planet's thin atmosphere. Clouds parted, revealing a landscape of vast plains, crystal rivers, and mountain ridges that glowed faintly under the sun. The ruins of spire-like towers rose in the distance, half buried in green. The air shimmered with a faint golden mist. They landed near the edge of a valley. When the hatch opened, real air, cool, sharp, unfiltered, swept through the corridors for the first time in generations. The crew stepped out in silence, tasting wind, touching soil. Some wept. Others laughed softly, uncertain how to react to something that was neither steel nor artificial light. Oren knelt, running his fingers through the grass. It was warm to the touch, alive in a way the ship's recycled life could never imitate. "We were not meant to stay among stars forever," he murmured. "We were meant to find our way back to something that breathes." Isha crouched beside him. "Do you think this is what the forge intended?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it is what the hollow left behind, a reminder that even darkness can give birth to worlds." They explored the nearest ruins. The architecture was unlike anything human, yet strangely welcoming. Arches of translucent stone curved toward the sky. Pathways were lined with crystalline fragments that pulsed faintly underfoot. In the heart of the largest structure stood a pedestal carved with two interlocking shapes, one bright, one dark, forming a circle. Isha traced the carving with her fingertips. "Balance," she whispered. Oren nodded. Perhaps that was the lesson all along. The forge tried to destroy its shadow. The hollow tried to consume its light. Neither could live alone. "And humanity stands between them," she said. "Maybe that is what we were made for." As days turned to weeks, The crew built shelters from the ruins. Gardens began to grow. The ardent path rested on the valley floor like a monument to survival, its hull gleaming under alien sunlight. At night, they lit fires and told stories of the stars, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. Children ran across the fields where once there had been only metal. When they looked up, they saw a sky filled not with corridors of steel, but with constellations born anew, patterns written from memory, half human, half something greater. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky deepened to violet, Oren climbed a ridge overlooking the valley. Isha followed, carrying the same crystal shard she had once set upon the ship's railing. Its light pulsed faintly, answering the rhythm of the world around them. He looked out at the horizon. "Do you hear it?" She closed her eyes. "The hum? Yes, it is everywhere now, in the wind, in the soil, even in the heartbeat of this world." She smiled faintly. "The ship is no longer our cage. It has become our seed." Oren turned to her. "Do you think we will stay?" "For a while," she said, "but someday others will come. Humanity will travel again, not to escape, but to understand." He nodded. "To keep the flame." They stood in silence, the shard's light reflecting in their eyes. Above them, the stars shimmered, some familiar, some new. Among them, one glowed brighter than the rest, golden white with a faint trace of shadow at its edge. Oren watched it, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think the forge still watches us?" Isha smiled softly. "If it does, I think it finally sees what it was trying to make." Years passed. The valley became a settlement, then a city of glass and living stone. The descendants of the ardent path grew into a people who no longer feared the dark. They learned to weave both light and shadow into their craft, not as enemies, but as parts of the same whole. Their children were taught that creation and destruction were the twin hands of the same maker, and that endurance was the true inheritance of humankind. Oren lived to see the first new ship rise from the valley, built from alloy and crystal, powered not by engines alone, but by the balanced resonance of light and void. When it lifted from the ground, its flight left no fire, no smoke, only a soft golden shimmer that faded peacefully into the sky. He stood beside Isha, now older, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes still fierce. She watched the ship vanish into the clouds. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly, "leaving the forge behind, defying Halden, breaking the link?" Oren shook his head. "If we had not, we would never have learned to live." She smiled faintly. "And what will you call this place?" He looked across the valley, at the rivers reflecting sunlight, at the towers growing among vines. "Home," he said simply. "At last home." The wind carried their laughter into the fields, where light and shadow met without conflict. The hum of the world deepened, echoing through mountains and sky, a song older than either the forge or the hollow, the voice of something human that had finally learned to listen. Above, the stars pulsed in silent rhythm, and one by one, their light reflected in the eyes of a new people who had once been wanderers. Humanity had endured the void, and now, at last, it had remembered how to begin.